This is Screencast, Chapters 6, 7, and 8, Part 2. We left off talking about colored pencils, and I was talking about the burnishing technique where the artist lays it on very thickly, almost like painterly, and you don't see the paper or the surface in which they're working on. This one is a good example showing the artist actually working on a colored ground and then the pencil skipping across the surface to where you see kind of this static-y come through, but because it's this medium toned kind of flesh tone paper, you can see that working to the artist's advantage. Now here is where the artist is working in the colored pencils on a black ground. It almost has a glow to it. And then again here you see an artist who is on the right hand side working in the burnish technique on a white background. Now fabricated chalks also fall into that dry medium. This is made from pigment powder mixed with a binding medium to form a paste. Hence we get the word pastel from paste. It is the most well-known chalk medium. Page 150, figure 6-9 is an excellent example of a very famous pastel artist by the name of Edgar Degas. Now this is what pastel looks like. Normally pastels are pretty expensive, so most artists who are pastel artists will actually make their own, so they can mix their own certain colors and have a color palette that's associated with them. So here you can see actually instead of just being in that stick form, we see it also in a pencil form, so the artist can get a really nice sharp point on it. This is a current famous pastel artist by the name of Gary Kelly. If you've ever been in Barnes & Noble and up above their coffee shops and things like that, the Starbucks, there are what looks like authors sitting at tables drinking coffee. Those were all done by Gary Kelly. Now here again you can see that the tooth of the paper coming through, so the black of the paper kind of coming through like a static background. So this is going to be a personal aesthetic as to whether you like this technique or not. Here you can see working on that gray tone. It kind of lends itself to this older aging man with the gray tones. Again, another pastel piece. Good old Gandalf there. Here's one showing you a technique that's using kind of this crisscrossing, cross-hatching pattern to it. Now, pen and ink, again, is where I said that it kind of crosses over between the dry and the wet medium. Now, medieval monks began to use pens in drawings to fill their manuscripts. They usually were done with quills, which are goose feathers. And on page 151, you will see an example of brush and ink work. Remember that ink can also be put on in what is called a wash. So that is ink that is diluted with water and applied with a brush. Here's a really good example by Murray Tinkelman. He has recently passed, but he was a very current illustrator doing pen and ink work. This would have been done in what is called a cross-hatching technique, so lines crossing over the top of each other, sort of like a screen look. This is an ink wash done by a current illustrator, John Clapp. Now, metal point. Metal point is the ancestor of the graphite pencil. It was popular during the Renaissance. It's not as popular now. Of course, we always have some artists who like to do things that are not popular, but what this is basically taking a thin silver wire and mounting it in some sort of wooden holding shaft, so like a modern day mechanical pencil. The drawing is done on what is called a prepared ground, so poster paint or some sort of bone dust and glue. This isn't forgiving. There's no erasing. So once a mark is made, it's there. And it is really best suited for kind of small scale drawings. For one thing, it's light, it's delicate, and the larger you get, the more mistakes you can also make. So page 148, figure 6-6 in your text, you'll see an example of a metal point. Here's showing you kind of a close-up of what that metal point looks like, and then on the right hand side showing you how delicate and light that metal point looks. Now here's showing you the process of how to create this. So that prepared ground with the bone dust, and then applying that to the paper and then drawing on the top of that with the metal point. Here's some examples. There's of course different types of metal. It's not just silver, so you have gold, copper, platinum, and the silver, and it comes in different sizes too. So you can note some are really thin and small, and some are wide and fat. Here's showing you an example of just how dark you can actually get, and so you can see they're pretty light in value. Now the digital realms is one of those that falls in between, whether it's dry or it's wet, because if you think about it, if you're drawing on the computer, you're really drawing with light, you're not drawing with pigment, so therefore it would have to be, I think, my opinion is that it's dry, it's nothing that's wet, but when you print it out, actually it's printed in ink, so therefore it is wet. Digital realm has been one of those with computers. It's come a really long way in a short period of time, and artists are really excelling in this, but that's mainly because of technological advances. We're seeing a lot that is changing. Instead of having a mouse that's off to the side from a screen, now we have things like the sketch pad, the pen, the brush. They're adapting to things that and tools that artists actually use, so therefore the artwork is changing and looking better. This is one that I particularly love just because it's very painterly looking. You can see that kind of brush strokey kind of look to it. Again, very interesting, very advanced looking, really loving some of these. Now, computers are a useful tool. Advantages is this is the artist can save the work in various stages. So, you know, if they liked it and then they did something that they didn't like, they can go back and kind of undo things. They can also cut and paste different pieces and parts from different drawings, and they don't have to commit. In traditional materials, you can take things too far and you can ruin a piece, but this you can actually get to go back. And again, like I said, it's essentially drawing with light. So there are interpretation differences that happen when you have somebody who draws on a monitor and they're drawing with light, and then when it tries to interpret that into an ink, a solid opaque thing, then sometimes we lose what it actually was that was originally done on the monitor. Now, drawing. This is the basics of all art. There are three types of drawings. There's the mental notes, the study, the complete work of art, which is the final. So the mental note is actually a sketch or notation or record of something seen, remembered, imagined that may be inclined in a work of art. So in other words, this could be that just that idea that you have in their head, and that's where a lot of people are at. A lot of people say they can't draw, but they have those ideas. Those mental notes is still considered a drawing. The study is where it's actually put down on something in paper, some sort of document. So it's the beginning. So it can be that sketch on a napkin or whatever it might be. And then the complete work of art is the final piece of art. So we're going to look at some different types of drawing techniques. And this is actually what is called cross-hatching. So here you can see an example of different styles of the same thing. It's just how did the artist do it. When we see the tight, very perfect, you know, and this by no means is perfect, but if you took a ruler and drew those lines with the ruler. Then the organic is a little bit more free. Wild, that's probably where I'm at because I have little patience when it comes to this. And then the contour is where we're actually, if we were drawing a ball and we were trying to do cross-hatching on that ball, we would want those lines to curve with the shape of the ball. That's what I mean when I say contour. Okay, so here showing you different types of cross-hatch and how heavy. So you have a quarter to a full cross-hatch. So from dark to light on the value scales is what you see on the right. And you can see there that even you have some that are very organic and swirly, just crossing over each other, and then some that are a little bit more wild, like I said I would be. Okay, here again is an example of the guy who did the frog, Murray Tinkelman. This is a good example of his cross-hatching. This is one that I always throw in here because, of course, John Malkovich, and John Malkovich is from Benton, Illinois. But the fact that just because you can do a medium and you can do that particular technique well does not mean that that will lend itself to the particular subject matter. So yes, this is good. I know who it is, but it still looks like you took a screen and tried to draw a person with a screen. So it just doesn't really translate so well. Now this Audrey Beardsley cartoon, it does. It translates very well to a style at which the artist has. Okay, so you're going to have some drawings that you're going to have to do for me. And the drawings are going to be lines and they're going to be techniques. Okay, so this is going to be an example of one of the techniques in which you're going to draw balls. And they don't have to be big. They can be the size of a golf ball. And I want you to draw a ball that has light on it and shadow. So it's going to have the value changes. And I want you to do a cross hatching. So here's a good example of the cross hatching of a ball. Another technique that you're going to do is stippling. So stippling is drawing with dots. So the more dots there are, the darker the value. You spread those dots out, the lighter the value. Stippling is one of those that, as far as a technique, it's wonderful, but time-wise, it takes a long time. So again, you're going to be stippling a ball. But here I wanted to show you some of what artists today who do stippling are more likely to do. These was what we could call spot illustrations. So next to, let's say, an article or something like that, you would have a small little drawing. That's what that spot illustration is. This is a great piece that was done for an advertisement, I believe for McDonald's or Burger King or something like that. But that's all done in dots. But it's a lot of work, it's time consuming. An artist would have a very hard time making a living at this just because the time it takes to create a piece of artwork that looks like this. So here's the stippling of the ball. So that's your second technique you're going to do. Now rendering is the third technique. This is actually a computer rendering. I'm sure most of you are used to that, where we see that transition, or what you might call a gradient. So where it goes from blue to green and that blend in between, that's that rendering. So here's a really good example of a rendering, and these are graphite renderings. I wanted to show you because I know that the image on the left looks like a photograph, but it's not. It's actually a pencil rendering. So you see the artist on the right actually creating this piece. Pretty amazing. Now there are, of course, different levels of realism, and so therefore the piece on the right, amazing. The piece on the left, still amazing, but done differently, almost kind of cartoony versus that photorealistic. But they are all renderings. You may be familiar with the children's book Jumanji and Polar Express. These are really good examples of pencil renderings. So here's that example of a rendering. I want you to do the rendering of the ball also, those three techniques. I would suggest that you make sure and do the pencil rendering in pencil. The cross hatching, you can do it, the cross hatching and stippling, you can do those in ink or pencil. It just depends on what you would prefer. Now drawing. Drawing is really kind of something that we think of as intuitive, and oftentimes thought of as an artist's personal handwriting. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if I drew out, or if I wrote out something, my mom would recognize my handwriting. Well, she would do the same thing for my drawing. She would recognize my drawings, and that of course comes with time. Now many drawings that artists do are not intended to be seen by people. The oldest drawings we consider to be on the cave walls. And I'm going to stop this part 2, and we will pick up with the Lascaux Cave on part 3.